The Buddha taught that it was possible to end all of your suffering through your own efforts in this lifetime. That you, through your own actions, your own practice, your own life's energy, could become totally free. And this is the third noble truth. Awakening is possible. Nirvana, the end of suffering. So do you believe that? You don't have to answer me, but you can just reflect on it in your own sort of where you're at. So sometimes it's interesting to check in with our own minds and be like, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much confidence do I have tonight in what the Buddha taught 2,600 years ago, and how much I feel like that applies to me, to us? Do you think it's possible to actually be happy? Really, that's really a simpler way to actually live a life where you don't suffer and you're happy and you're... No, of course, it's really important, the definition here of the end of suffering, that it doesn't mean that pain is going to go away. It doesn't mean that loss is going to stop happening. It doesn't mean that, happiness from a Buddhist perspective is not getting your way all of the time. It's not feeling pleasant thoughts and feelings all of the time, but having such a wise relationship to pain and loss and the human mind and emotions that you don't suffer about it anymore. You see it clearly and you respond wisely. So follow-up question for you. These are kind of rhetorical, I guess, for your reflection. Follow-up question is, think for a moment, what are the 3 things that you suffer about most? What's your top 3? Maybe you have a top 20, but what are the top 3 things that are most difficult for you in your life, that cause the most stress, that cause the most fear, that cause the most anxiety, suffering, sadness? Now, of course, again, I want to back up to the Buddhist perspective, which is all of our suffering is self-created. And it's kind of a radical view that actually all of the ways that we suffer is because of how we are relating to what's happening. The Buddha has this very different perspective. It's not you're unhappy because of what's happening. You're unhappy because of how you're responding to what's happening. Pain isn't the cause of suffering. Loss isn't the cause of suffering. Hatred of pain causes suffering. Lack of compassion, lack of acceptance. So what are your top 3 ways that you cause yourself suffering? Frame it that way. And then, why don't you stop doing that? Do you think it's possible to stop doing the things that you are doing that are causing you suffering? I mean, it's all sort of some variation of I'm attached. Is attachment the cause of most of your suffering? Clinging? Trying to control? Wanting to keep something that's impermanent? Wanting to... So, can you stop clinging? Is it possible to let go? Scale of 1 to 10, how much confidence do you have in non-attachment as a actual experience that you can develop? Can you become non-attached? Or how about the other side? How much of your suffering is resisting what's happening? Not clinging to it, but wanting it to fucking go away. Aversion, anger, hatred, judgment. Not accepting what's happening, but resisting it. I can't tolerate it. Intolerance. Can you stop hating? Can you stop pushing? How about self-centeredness? How much of your suffering is coming from thinking about yourself all day? I, me, mine. Can you stop? Do you think you can stop being so self-centered? Do you feel like I'm being really mean to you right now? Okay, so all of that was just a, experiment in reflecting on the Buddha teaches that we can get free. And that all of the ways that we're causing suffering, our clinging, our aversion, our self-centeredness, greed, hatred, and delusion that cause our uneasiness, that we have the capacity to stop creating suffering. This is the core of the Buddha's teaching. It's one of the most radical things, and it's one of the things that sets him apart from almost all other traditions. Certainly he has a radical departure from the Hindu Brahmanic Indian tradition that he was raised in, which was a bit of a theistic tradition and believed that humans can't do it. This perspective, maybe some of you are familiar with it, that you are powerless, but that God could and would if he were sought. You can't do it. You're powerless. But a divine intervention is possible to end your suffering, to restore you to sanity. So the Buddha has this very radical other perspective that says, no, God's not going to do it. You have to do all of the work yourself. And you can. You're not powerless. You're powerful. You have the power to create all of the misery in your life. And you have the power to end all of the misery in your life. One of the simple ways that he put this was, he said, abandon all of the unwholesome actions, unwholesome, unskillful, unwise things that we've been doing. Stop doing it, right? Just stop doing that. Abandon greed and clinging. Stop clinging. Abandon hatred. Develop non-hatred. Abandon self-centeredness. Stop taking everything so personal. He says, abandon the unwholesome, and then follows that statement up with, it is possible. He says, I know from direct experience, it's possible to abandon, to stop these unskillful ways of being that cause suffering to ourselves, and also, of course, we cause a lot of suffering to each other when we're acting in unskillful, unwholesome, unwise ways. He said, stop doing that. I know it's possible. You can do it. He said, if it wasn't possible, I wouldn't ask you to do it. I'm not asking you to do something that's not possible. I'm not asking you to do something that I haven't done myself. I'm not talking about theoretical non-attachment. He said, I didn't start teaching this until I had done it myself. I'm just a dude, just a person, I'm not a god, I'm not magic, I'm not a saint, I'm not any of those things. I'm just a human being that was very interested in this question. Can human beings actually be happy? Is it possible for us to not suffer? He said, so I spent all of these years meditating on this and investigating it and practicing it. And I came to the direct experience that says, yes, it's possible to abandon that which is causing us suffering. We can stop. Renunciation. I know this is really, really old school. Some of you might remember it. There's a Bob Newhart skit. Some of you are old enough to remember Bob Newhart. Bob Newhart's playing a psychotherapist. And everybody comes into his therapy office and tells him what they're suffering about. And so like, this is happening and I'm doing this and I'm afraid of that. And just his therapeutic advice is stop doing that. Stop it. Just stop it. And it's like Buddha's coming across a little bit like that in this teaching, like abandon it. Just stop. So much easier said than done. The second part of this teaching, he says it's possible to do it, and this path, this Four Noble Truths, this Eightfold Path that will lead to the third truth, the experience of nirvana, of freedom, is a process of renunciation, and it's a process of cultivation. The follow-up, he says, cultivate, develop wholesome attitudes. Abandon hatred, develop compassion. Through developing compassion, you will have a wise relationship to pain. Rather than the easy status quo, I hate it, learn to tolerate it, learn to care about it, learn to forgive. He says, it is possible to cultivate, to develop wholesome attitudes, wholesome actions, skillful ways of being. He said, it's possible to do this. If it wasn't possible, I wouldn't ask you to do it. That I know it's possible to learn compassion, to learn non-attachment, to learn forgiveness, generosity, kindness, appreciation. You know what the list of skillful actions are. To develop these. When we abandon that which is causing us suffering and we develop the antidotes, that which ends suffering, we will directly experience the happiness that we were seeking our whole lives, that we've all been, looking for the same thing. Ease. May I be at ease with myself just as I am. May I not suffer so much about the pain in my life, the pain in this world. May I feel like I have a wise relationship to it. May I not just feel like it, may I actually be part of a positive change. Not just, and Buddhism then goes from not just for ourselves. Not only is it possible to do for ourselves, but that the more we do it, the more, which I feel like is sort of part 2 of what I wanted to talk about tonight. The more we start to see how important it is to do our own work for the benefit of others, for the possibility of creating a change on this planet. The Buddha, after his awakening, did not retire. He didn't just say like, cool, I'm enlightened. Peace out. He then spent over 40 years trying to help other people and their suffering. Both individually, saying, here's how to practice mindfulness. Here's how to practice renunciation. Here's these 5 precepts. Here's these loving kindness teachings, these compassion teachings, not only as a spiritual educator, but also as a social and political activist. From the inside, he saw, oh, this human condition, it's possible to do this. I need to tell everyone that might have some interest in doing this that it's possible. I need to spread the word. And because I see that how interdependent and interconnected we are. Do you think we're interconnected? Is the COVID virus waking you up to how interconnected this planet is? Sometimes we don't see it. We think, well, I'm over here, they're over there. I'm certainly reflecting on like, wow, look at this. Italy and Iran and China and, it's just like, this world is totally interconnected. Yes, globalization, yes. But the Buddha is saying this about the world 2,600 years ago. He's saying all beings are connected. That we're all on some level kind of the same. No matter your religion, no matter your ethnicity, no matter your age, no matter your sexual orientation, gender, any of that stuff, that this human experience is one where we suffer. Everyone suffers. And everyone wants to not suffer. And nobody really, hardly anybody knows how to do it. How do we do it? And even when you've been studying Buddhism or whatever you're studying for a while, you're kind of like, okay, I've got the map. I know that the right thing to do is non-attachment. I know that the right thing to do is compassion. Ajahn Chah, the lineage, kind of founder of the lineage that I'm most inspired by, closely connected to. At one point, I heard that he said something like, even for people who've been meditating for a long time, that maybe somewhere between 50 and 70% of the time you know what to do, but you can't quite do it. Does that feel like that to you sometimes? You've read all the books, you know, love is the answer. You heard the song, kindness is the solution. You know what to do, but you can't quite do it. You can post it on Instagram, but you can't quite live it. My sense is that we come to practice. Most of us. I know there's a couple people in the room that have a different experience of this, but most of us, I feel like, come to the practice out of some level of desperation. Some suffering motivates us. It gets bad enough. Your life gets. Something happens in your life where you're like, okay, I'll fucking meditate. I guess it's this, come to this. I don't know. I might be really projecting that, but that's really, for me, it was just like, I felt like such a failure when I started meditating. I didn't feel like this is something cool to do. I felt like I had exhausted all other possibilities for happiness. Heroin didn't work. I guess I'll meditate. Some people report to me that actually life was pretty good, and I thought maybe it could be even better. Maybe meditation would take me just to that next level of satisfaction, of happiness, but that it wasn't out of desperation. It was out of like making a healthy choice for the sake of making some people do that. Do you know that? There's these people that actually are just like, yeah, like this would just be good for me. I think I'll just do something. My back's not against the wall, but I'll just do something good for me. Whatever the reason that we start practicing, which my sense is that usually there's some self-motivation, something about I want to be different than I am. All the way from like, I want to survive. If I don't do this, I'm going to kill myself or I'm going to die, or to, other motivations of like, I just could be a bit happier. I keep thinking about that book and that came out, 10% Happier, where the news anchor said, I'm pretty happy, rich, and I'm famous, and a little bit stressed out about being rich and famous, but I heard meditation was a good idea. What if I could be 10% happier than I am? And there's people, there's people like that, kind of fairly well-adjusted, successful citizens in the world that say, I'll meditate. And he said, yeah, it worked. Made me 10% happier than I used to be. Did he have more suffering?
Panic attacks. Yeah, he was.
And it decreased them by 10%? I just want to pick on him. Let me pick on him. I didn't read the book, but was it more desperation than I'm making it to be?
Always.
Yes. And then at some point when you start to practice and you think, how am I going to let go? And then you meditate. You keep meditating and you go on your retreats and you come and you start to see what felt like an impossible amount of self-centered and greed and anger that I'd never be able to let go of it. As you see it, that it gradually loosens. It starts to decrease. And you see, I've been meditating for a while and I am 10% less self-centered than I used to be. And now I'm 20% less attached than I used to be. And now I'm only half as angry as I used to be. And wherever you are on that process of awakening, for lack of a better word, at some point you find that you're not, most of us, I think, that you're not really meditating for yourself anymore. That there's a shift from a selfish motivation to an altruistic motivation, where you see, not only is this good for me, this is good for everyone that I come into contact with, and this understanding, this is good for the world. This is good. The more I practice, the more I become a force of kindness and generosity and inspire other people to practice. And we are having a day-long meditation retreat here this Saturday, a couple of days ago. And we're doing walking meditation in the neighborhood out behind Costco. And someone came back and reported that during one of the walking meditation practices, where we're kind of walking slowly, and it's clear that, and we're just walking back and forth. You're not walking around the block, you're just coming back and forth. And that a houseless person came up to one of the meditators and said, are you meditating? Can you teach me about that? By modeling it out in public and being weird in Venice, walking back and forth down the street by the meditation center, that there was a way in which all of a sudden that became an act of generosity. That became let me model this for you, and said, can you teach me it? And then the person gave some meditation instructions, basic, pay attention to your footsteps, right, left, right, left. And the person said, cool, and took off. And who knows if that person will apply it, but there is something about that, to me, that feels important and feels powerful. And of course, I'm in a role in my life where over and over and over, I get to teach people meditation, not just people that come to classes, but out in the world. I like to play poker. And often if I'll play poker during the day sometimes, and it's the same guys, and it's these retired guys, and then the young professional poker players, and pretty soon, and I kind of like it because I used to get to be anonymous. I mean, I like playing poker; it's fun, but also it's like I get to, just be a degenerate playing poker with the other degenerates playing poker. But inevitably, we start talking to each other and like, well, what do you do? And I say, oh, I teach meditation. And over, the other poker players are like, teach me meditation. Is that good for your poker game? Will that help me win more money? Or will that help me suffer less when I lose money? Will that give me some equanimity, some ease, some well-being when I play and I lose? And being able to say, yes, of course, I don't know if it'll help you win more money or not, but it will help you work with the emotions of gain and loss, and how your mind, responds to gain and loss. Where I'm trying to go is the way that we influence each other and that we are connected and interconnected. How we live our lives has consequences. We are influential. We are not. I'm not trying to pick on the 12 steps, but I don't. We're not powerless. We actually are powerful in how we speak and how we act. It has the power to cause harm to each other. When the Buddha is saying, abandon the unwholesome, you can stop lying and stealing and being mean. You can actually stop being mean. You can start being kind and honest. These are, and it's not like, of course, putting like, stop doing this, start doing that. It might take years to get good at being honest. It might take years, maybe even decades, to really develop the skill, the wholesome skill of non-attachment. To develop compassion. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not a decision. Like, I think I'll be forgiving and compassionate from now on. That sounds like a good idea. It's going to be messy. It's going to be a process of making some 2 steps forward, 1 step back. There's my father's first book, one of my favorite books. It wasn't his first book, but it was the first book of his that I wrote, called Gradual Awakening. And just the title, gradually we wake up. If you meditate daily, if you come to retreats, if you practice the 5 precepts, if you follow this path, 1 step, 1 foot at a time, 1 breath at a time, you'll make some progress and you'll slowly abandon that which was causing you suffering. The greed, the hatred, the delusion, self-centeredness and fear will lessen. And kindness and generosity and compassion will increase. It's possible to do that. I know from direct experience, most of you doing this for a while, you see, yeah, it works. Some. Doesn't work quickly. When the Dalai Lama was one time asked, what's the fastest way to enlightenment? I think maybe it was even framed like something like easiest, cheapest, fastest way to liberation. And first he got angry. First he modeled anger. He's like, that's the worst fucking question ever. You're stupid. Why'd you ask me that stupid question? He didn't say that, but he was pissed. He said, this is the problem. That question is the problem. There's no quick, fast, easy, cheap way to liberation. Anybody that tries to sell you that is ripping you off. He said this is a practice for our life, is a lifestyle. It is a direction that we take our life. He said, I'm the Dalai Lama. I'm the 14th incarnation of this Lama, supposedly. And he's got some humility and he said, I've been practicing. I forget how old he was at this point, 60 or something, 60s. He said, I've been practicing. He said, they took me to the monastery when I was like 2 or 4 or something like that. He said, in that first year, like 4 to 14, I don't know if I made any progress. I was trying to meditate, but I was just a little kid. And he said, but then as a teenager, he said, I got serious. I started really doing my practice. He said, in that decade of like 14 to 24, I noticed that I was suffering less the more that I meditated. Less self-centeredness, less fear, less clinging, less aversion. He said, and then 24 to 34, I made some more progress, even though like I lost my country. I lost, I was in the middle of this genocide. Like there was some real shit going down. And I saw that my practice allowed me to suffer less about it, to have more compassion for the communist Chinese and what was happening there, and less hatred. He said, and then I forget where I was, but 34 to 44 and 44 to, he said, every decade, and this was the core answer to this question was, he says, commit to your practice, do your practice. Orient your life in the direction of this simple, I want to try to abandon that which has been causing me suffering. I want to try to let go. I want to try to stop that. I want to try to cultivate the wholesome, the skillful, the wisdom. I'm going to dedicate my life's energy to trying to develop that. He said, and then every decade or so, check in on your progress. And think about your progress and your awakening, your healing, your recovery. Yes, one day at a time. Yes, one breath at a time. Yes, right now. But in a long-term, gradual process of decades. Not weeks, not months, but decades of practice. Is that uninspiring? I feel like it's realistic. I feel like it's been my experience. Lines up with how I hear the Buddha's teaching here, the Dalai Lama's encouragement. Slow and steady. I haven't been able to fully abandon attachment. I've been meditating for over 30 years. I can't 100% of the time practice non-clinging, but way less than half as much as I used to. I feel like it's just a fraction of the kind of attachment that I had when I, clinging and controlling and craving that I came to the practice with. It's just been diminished and it's still here. Still cling, still crave. But a fraction of what it was like before years of practice. One of the biggest shifts that happened for me, and hopefully it's happening for you, and this statement of abandon or stop, which feels so like black and white, like you're either clinging or you have completely let go. Part of the abandonment is abandonment of a belief system or a view. I still cling, but I never think I'm doing the right thing when I'm clinging. Does that make sense to you? When I was clinging, I used to think like, oh, of course I'm doing the right thing. Greed is good. More crack for me is good. clinging, craving, accumulating, stealing, lying. I believed in that shit. And then I said, oh no, that's all causing me suffering. I gotta stop. Abstinence from the drugs, abstinence from the, and not that I became perfectly honest overnight, but I stopped believing that clinging or trying to control or trying to covet or jealousy or envy, any of that stuff. I no longer believe that it serves me in any way. Likewise with anger, with hatred. I still get mad. My mind still gives me terrible advice. You should get revenge. You should. All of those things continue to happen. But in my heart, in my wisest part of my mind, I don't believe that hatred is ever the solution. I was at a punk show the other night, TSOL, and some drunken punk rocker wanted to have a political discussion with me, and standing next to him, and he started talking about Trump and started talking about fuck Bernie and about how punk rock Trump was because he wasn't a career politician like this fucking Bernie commie guy. And he was really trying to push my buttons because he knew. He took one look at me and he knew. Well, I think he was hoping I was some sort of Nazi with head tattoos. I think he pretty quickly realized that I was one of those lefty liberals. And he said, at one point he just asked me point blank, he's like, how much do you hate Trump? Scale of 1 to 10. And I said, I try not to hate him at all. I try not to meet, and this is where I kind of, I said, I try not to meet ignorance and confusion and idiocy with hatred. I try to meet it with compassion. I try to meet it with forgiveness. I try not to hate anybody, no matter how confused they are. Now, I can't do that. I do hate sometimes. I totally hate sometimes, but I try not to, right? My intention, the Buddha's Dharma that encourages us to abandon hatred and to cultivate compassion. Can I do it? We can't do it perfectly, but we can keep trying to do it and keep orienting ourselves towards that which will end suffering rather than justifying our anger and hatred and attachment and self-centeredness, which what we're doing is justifying our suffering. I'm going to suffer at them. Some of my thoughts about the Buddha's teaching around abandoning and cultivating, abandoning the unwholesome, cultivating the wise, the wholesome, the skillful. What are your thoughts? How does it land? Does it make sense? Do you want to argue? Let's do it. Yeah, you want to argue. Alan wants to argue.
That's a question. I've been practicing for 30 years. I probably meditate 30 minutes a day. Well, I ain't been doing as much meditation more.
Decades.
Okay, so say I have a level, I would say of 10%. Some of that comes from the wisdom of aging, of experience. I don't know what comes from meditation or what doesn't. It's just wisdom and self-reflection. Why am I not at 60%? So what I'm saying is if some people meditate, they go to retreats, and they still have a level of unease.
Right.
What would you say is their answer and solution to that?
I want to make a joke, but
Go for it.
I'm gonna hold my tongue. Because really, it's a serious question.
If you're saying enlightenment is possible,
it's a serious
people
question.
go all the time and they meditate a lot, and they read the text, and they read Buddhist books, and they still have a sense of unease, right? Why is that?
Right. I don't know, really. Like, I have to just, I don't know the answer to that question. I would be interested in speaking to you or Ron or anybody else about what are the specific practices. Like, could we identify any kind of holes in the practice? Like, here's what the Buddha taught. Here's the Eightfold Path. Like, are we living fully in harmony with every aspect of the Eightfold Path? If the progress hasn't been, how much time has been dedicated to forgiveness meditation practice over these 30 years? Like, have you put a decade into loving kindness? Have you put a decade into compassion, Tonglen type of, I would really just want to look at the whole toolbox and see, there's some tools in there that aren't being used. Because certainly, for sure, there's people that do 20, 30, 40 years. And I don't know, Alan, I've never really talked with you completely about the specifics of your practice. But there are people who just, like, they hear that the breath is the object, and then they spend 30 years ignoring their mind and paying attention to their breath, and then never actually developing a wise relationship to their mind and staying very reactive. I'm not accusing you of this. But I know meditators who like to get very serious about meditation. They end up doing kind of a bypass where the Buddha is saying, turn towards everything that's in you. Feel it. Feel your pain. Feel your sorrow. Feel your craving. And let it go. But not ignore it. But turn towards it. So I wonder if there's any places where a few years of loving kindness would shift something, or a few years of forgiveness practice would shift something. So I'd be curious about that. And I don't know, everybody does develop at a different rate. And I think the Buddhist answer is something about our karma, which isn't a very satisfying answer of what kind of karma are we coming in with? How much karma do we need to burn off? Do you know about the levels of enlightenment? It's in Theravada in Buddhism. It said that there's 4 levels of enlightenment, and one is at the first level you become a stream enterer, which means you've had enough insight. Right? I know I started this talk by saying you can do it in this life. He said, it is possible to do it in this life. He said, but many people, they will come to the Dharma, they will get enough insight, not quite to get fully enlightened in this life, but they'll become stream enterers. They've entered into and are going against the stream. He said, and that means that you will have final liberation within 7 incarnations. But you're going to have to come back, maybe 6, 7 more times. So then there's the once returner, where you've had a deep level of insight and progress and liberation, but you're gonna have to live this whole life out and burn off all the rest of the karma of this body, this lifetime. And you're gonna have to come back one more time. And that one more time you come back doesn't necessarily have to be a long incarnation. It might be, if I'm skeptical about my own view here, but I'll say it. Maybe people that die young were once returners, and they needed to come back and burn off just a little bit of karma. They didn't need to live a long life. They needed they had a couple years or, teenage till they just need to burn off some karma and then liberated. And then there's the non-returner. The non-returner, you have to live out the karma of this life. And that and you might continue to suffer and burn off the karma, but you've dedicated to the path. And it might be a sort of it doesn't mean you're going to have an easy, peaceful life, but that upon your deathbed at the end of your life, your karma will be done, your non-attachment will be clear, your compassion will be fully realized, and you will have nirvana, you will be liberated. So I want to open to the possibility that you're a non-returner, and that these 30 years of practice that you've put in, you still have another 30, 40 maybe. I'll give you 35. All right. You still have some more time to practice and to burn off the karma, and who knows what's going to happen towards the end. You had a lot of, you and I may be meditating around the same amount of time. Your early life conditioning was a lot different than my early life conditioning. I had addiction, all that stuff. But I also had the Dharma. I was born into a Dharma family. I had the kind of karma that, like, I was taught this stuff as a child and dutifully rejected it and smoked crack and shot heroin and committed some felonies. But then when I came to the Dharma, there was some of those seeds were already in me, for sure, because I was raised with it. And I think it's one of the reasons why my practice was able to develop in the way that it was, because I was raised with it in some ways. So I don't think comparing is such a useful thing, but it's a serious question, and I don't have the full answer, but there's different ways to look at it. What practices am I doing? Maybe it's working a lot better than I know, and this kind of the reason I keep suffering is because I really am burning off some old stuff, and I'm just going to get more and more free towards the end of my life. Hopefully, that's the case.
Well, I wouldn't say I'm really suffering. I'm actually a pretty happy person.
Yeah.
Okay, but what I'm saying is there's deep feelings that sometimes arise. Fear, anger, intense feelings, affect.
Mm-hmm.
And they're, at times I consider that suffering. Even though I have a pretty good relationship to them, like this will pass. Yeah. This will pass. But it arises a lot, particularly in the environment I'm living in and what's happening in my external world, right? My family system, the suffering of other people I know, what's happening in the body politic and society, the decay of society, worries about that.
Yeah.
So these are fears fears and concerns and anxieties that are very troubling. I don't think they're that unusual. Maybe many people in this room, right? And so, and they're sticky.
Yes.
They're sticky. So,
but that's it. It's all how much do we cling to them? How much they arise is the core statement here. It's not what's happening. It's how we relate to what's happening. So I would hope that you're not judging that you get, these difficult thoughts and feelings. It's just how much we stick to them. That's where we see our progress. How much we cling, how sticky they are. And if a lot of the time you're able to see it arise and let it pass without suffering about it, amazing progress. Most people can't do that at all. Without meditation, without your 30 years of practice, you wouldn't be able to do that.
It helps being 69 years old and going through a lifetime of experiencing it and saying, there it is again.
Yes.
When I was younger, I didn't have those experiences.
Yeah. But there's a lot of people that are your age and don't have a trained mind, haven't meditated, and don't have that self-awareness. They just take it all quite personally. It's Buddha and the Mara and Mara. Mara keeps coming back. That aspect of the mind never leaves. But the Buddha never suffers about it again. Ron, your thought? Yeah, please.
Yes, I want to ask you on a Buddhist perspective.
Yeah.
My girlfriend's mom is dying.
Yeah.
So the doctor asked us, do you want us to resuscitate? And I have difficulty telling him that don't do it.
Right.
From a Buddhist perspective, do you believe that I have a right to ask someone to kill her?
I like the way you phrased it. From a Buddhist perspective, no.
I have no right.
You have no right. She has the right to have done a do not resuscitate. If you know that would be her wishes, I think it's a different story.
Yeah, she's done.
Yeah, and the conversation had never taken place. Yeah, it's very tricky. Buddhism is very big on not taking anyone's life.
It will also affect my karma.
Do you know the story about Ajahn Chah? One of the things for a Buddhist monk is that you can't kill. If you kill, you're disrobed. You're no longer a monk. Just before Ajahn Chah went into a long-term coma, he knew he was becoming ill. And he had given a public talk saying, if anything happens to me, do not resuscitate. Do not do any extreme measures. Just let me die. But when he had this major stroke, they hooked him to life support. And then, the monks started arguing, like, dude, he just told us to not do this. But once they had done it, because you don't know in that moment, like, well, do we try to, because maybe he could make a full recovery. By the time it was clear that he wasn't going to make a full recovery, nobody was willing to say, let's unplug him. Because any of the monks that said, let's unplug him, even they all knew he would like to be unplugged. This is our teacher. We love him. We know he would like to be unplugged. But if we do it, we'll be breaking our vows. So he lived for over 8 years in basically a coma. And there was a lot of conflict in the community about, like, this is our beloved teacher, and couldn't we just let him die when he wanted to die? But once he was plugged in, none of those, monastic Buddhists were willing to take that karma. Even though, when it's somebody's wishes, I would think, like, send me in, I'll unplug him. The dude wanted it. That would be a blessing, right? He doesn't want to be on that machine. Let him off.
How did he?
Till he died of natural causes, at some point. It was like over 8 years later. His body just stopped. Yeah, there was some. It wasn't a respirator. It was all the other stuff. Feeding tubes and all of that stuff to keep your body alive. We're just about out of time. Quick one. Yes or no question, Wes?
It's not yes or no.
You can ask me later. I hope that this lands as inspiring. That it's really, I feel like the core of this kind of talk is the Buddha really saying, you can do it. You'll get free if you do the work. And then it's up to us. Like, how much work am I willing to do? Am I really willing to get on the cushion every day? Can I make this a priority in my life? And am I willing to let go of some of this stuff that I know is causing me suffering, but it's kind of fun? That I know is causing me, but justified anger and political arguments are so delicious. Hating the ignorant is, and am I willing to actually stop that? Do I want to be happy more than I want to be right? Do I want to be free more than I want to be self-righteous? I do. I want to be free more. I hope you find that in yourself too. And if you can, come to a retreat with us in May, Memorial Day retreat, May 22nd through 25th. Good time to deepen the practice. That's our next retreat. Next week, is it next week yet? In 2 weeks, Sunday the 22nd, we're starting a 4-month study course on Ajahn Chah, the core teachings of Ajahn Chah, where we're going to read some of his literature. We're going to meet on Sundays from 1 to 3 here, monthly in March, April, May, and June for 4 months. And people that take that course will have an opportunity to have a 30-minute practice support interview, one-on-one meeting with me throughout each month throughout the process. So consider joining for that. If you haven't signed up, you can sign up for both of those on the website, againstthestream.com. And Against the Stream is supported by the generosity of the people who attend. As you are aware, we don't charge you at the door. Everyone's welcome here, regardless of ability to pay. We don't want to turn anyone away. And so we do the whole thing for donation. We're a nonprofit, a 501c3, and please be generous. Some people in the community become monthly supporters, where you say, whether I show up or don't show up, I want to give $25, $50, $100 a month to Against the Stream, any amount that you choose. And that helps us pay the rent and pay the employee, and then if there's any left over, I get paid too. It's been a while, but eventually there'll be enough left over after paying the rent that I'll get my livelihood back. So thank you for your generosity. And Ricky, what else?
Monday morning, the 16th.
Oh yeah, couple spots?
5.
5 spots for the tea ceremony next Monday. And we need commitments. It's cool. I've done it a bunch of times. We sit and drink tea in a sort of meditative way, and you drink a whole bunch of tea and get kind of jacked on black tea. There's 5 openings. Some of you want to come next Monday at 5:00. Nobody wants the tea with us? Yeah, Wes, you down? 1. George, you coming? Yeah, Jazz, okay. So that's 3, 4 here, 5:00. Yeah, you're in. Okay, I think that's 5. All of you that said that, come and raise your hand. Come talk to Ricky so we get your name and your email and we confirm with you. Yeah. Many goodness that comes from our practice and discussion of the Buddha's Dharma be gathered and shared outward in all directions. May each one of us come to awakening, and together may we create a positive change on this planet, a change that brings about more equality, more justice, more wisdom and compassion to all beings in existence.